Good morning and welcome to the new week. It's our town meeting talk show for May the 11th, Monday. I'm J.R. Lewis with you here on KLAM and very glad to have you out there joining us. This is our local talk program. It's available on demand. There has been demand recently as we try to keep everything straight with pandemic response. And we want to offer our thanks, as always, to Cordova Wireless Communications, the sponsor of this show all throughout the year for many years. And we can't do this effectively without their help. They are your local cell phone provider, of course, and they provide your local talk show. Remember, if you have ever have any ideas for a guest, or you want to be a guest, or suggest a topic, any of that kind of thing, we're always open to that, so just let us know. And lately, of course, our programs here have been archived on our new YouTube channel, newish YouTube channel. It's been online since about December, created by Robbie. It's called Cordova TV, and the address is youtube.com/Cordova TV. I don't think this is going to take very long today. The main thing that we want to do is get ourselves back up to speed from last week by airing for you the city's briefing that they did live over YouTube Friday at 4 p.m. So we'll run that, and then anything else that maybe needs to be covered as we move forward, we'll just sort of reflect upon afterwards. But for right now, this is the briefing, again, with Mayor Copeland and some processor guests, as I recall. And we bring it to you now on the Town Meeting Show.
We're going to have a fairly brief update to the community today because we have some special guests with us this afternoon to give us some insight into some of our preparations for our first Cop River salmon. So for our Cordova update, we did have one positive test. We had 127 individuals tested. We're awaiting results on 34 of those, and our testing capacity is 850. So the medical health team reported that more tests are ordered, and Monday and Wednesday we are offering free testing, actually, for anyone who has arrived to Cordova in the last 14 days. And on Monday and Wednesdays, those will be from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the Alanka Community Health Center, downstairs across from the Episcopal Church. And on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 2 to 4 p.m. at Cordova Community Medical Center in the ambulance bay. And again, these are free screening tests being offered to anyone who's arrived to Cordova in the last 14 days. We do have some new rules in place. The City Council voted unanimously to approve proposed rules 2020-07. This updated emergency order was enacted by City Manager Helen Howarth. And with advice from the medical team, it's intention for Cordova to match the state's Phase 1A rules regarding opening up. There were some changes as we were rolling those rules out, but what I'd like to mention in regards to these new rules is that the reopening of the businesses and the work that the incident management team has been doing to distribute packets to help businesses in the community and receive the mutual aid agreements that we've been requesting, and also responding back to questions and answers about new rules and openings. So just as a few reminders, you have to quarantine for 14 days if you are arriving from Cordova from out of state. You need to wear masks in all public places, including the harbor, the gas station, and wherever you cannot maintain 6 feet of distance. Remember, there are some health-related exemptions to those requirements. And also, remember that social distancing, 6 feet is 6 feet. Measure it out so you understand it's a little farther than some people think. Disinfect those surfaces. Stay home as much as possible. There shouldn't be any group gatherings of more than 20 people, and no non-essential travel, but you may travel for medical purposes, for subsistence purposes, and do not have to quarantine when you return to Cordova unless you have left the state of Alaska. Continue to monitor for illness and extra precautions. Take extra precautions if you're at higher risk, over the age of 65 or have underlying medical conditions. So that's our weekly update. press briefing. But I'd like to add that as we know, and as I mentioned earlier, we have our first positive test case. It is not an unexpected case, but neither is it cause for exceptional alarm. It was identified as part of a screening process. It was part of a plan. The individual was asymptomatic, continues to be asymptomatic. So there were no symptoms, but we have tested all the employees around that case and retested the employees who have been arriving. All of those tests have come back negative, so it's looking more and more like a very isolated and well-isolated case, and we'll get the final pieces as we get the epidemiological tracking report back from the state. So in the case of that positive test, one of our seafood processors, Ocean Beauty, was their employee, and I want to focus today on how well they responded to that case. And how well the industry in general is prepared to handle any cases that do surface through testing or through symptoms, and how ready Cordova, its fleet, and fishermen are to harvest Copper River salmon and to keep the community protected in the process. The first opener is Thursday, and we have some special guests here to discuss that with us. We have Shannon Carroll from Trident Seafoods, who is their Associate Director of Public Policy. And we also have the Regional Operations Manager based here in Cordova for Trident Seafoods, Mr. Rick Isaacson. So I want to welcome you both to this evening's press briefing. And I guess I'd just like to start by asking you, Shannon and Rick, what has Trident Seafoods done to prepare for protecting your own crews, the community, and having a great fishery this year?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Coughlin. Thanks for the question, and thanks again for inviting us to participate in your daily briefing. I think Trident's been pretty upfront about this, but certainly deserves repeating. For us, the health and safety of Cordova residents, our employees, our fishermen, it's the top priority. So we've been working really hard to make sure that we have plans in place that put that priority at the forefront. Before I get into some of those details, I do just want to first commend the city, the incident management team, and the residents of Cordova for working so hard to get the city prepared for the Copper River fishery. This has definitely been a challenging situation for everyone, but the leadership that Cordova has shown is really commendable. Obviously, the hard work's yet to be done, and I'm not suggesting that we take our foot off the gas, but I think we're in a really good position going into the season, so I just wanted to say thank you. With respect to your question, like all critical infrastructure businesses, we've submitted community and workforce protection plans to the state. Those plans were reviewed and approved by the state, and then they're also, for those that aren't aware, they're public and they're available on the city's COVID-19 website. So you can find the details of what we're going to be doing, some of our protocols for fishermen, vendors, and things like that. And I'll go into a little bit more detail of some of the highlights from those plans, but first wanted to note a couple of things. The first is these plans have been approved by the state, but we're going to continue to update and adapt these plans to make sure that they're in line with changing best practices, on-the-ground health conditions, testing technology and availability. So in that sense, they're definitely living documents, and an example of that is, as testing technology and availability has really improved over the last really like 2 weeks. We've since changed our quarantine protocol in Anchorage to now require PCR nasal swab tests before our employees leave for Cordova or any of our other facilities. So we see that as really positive, and we're very diligent about staying on top of that. And then, second, I do just want to note that we welcome feedback on our plans. For the past several weeks, we've been participating with weekly calls with the incident management team here, and then we've received feedback from Dr. Sanders and the city. But if others have feedback, please feel free to reach out to Rick or myself. So with respect to the plan itself, a few highlights of what we're doing to keep people in Cordova safe, our employees safe, and our fishermen safe. The main thing is the 14-day quarantine in Anchorage. That's a monitored quarantine with testing near the end, and then secured transport from the hotel to the airport and then to the plant in Cordova. so there's no cross-contamination in public space or anything like that. And we think that's really the best thing that we can do to prevent the virus from entering Cordova and entering our facility. At the facility, we have daily health checks, temperature screenings, the closed campus for all of our bunkhouse employees. We do have, resident employees in Cordova, and they're going to be allowed to return home, but they are going to be abiding by all the state and local mandates. And all the protocols that we have are going to be strictly enforced in a condition of employment. And then we'll have a nurse practitioner at the facility that's able to provide on-site medical care, and that nurse practitioner is going to meet with the local medical providers when they arrive and make sure that there's good lines of communication there. And then we have protocols for fishermen to minimize interaction, things like that, such as remaining on the vessel, and that's also posted on the Cordova COVID-19 website. And then we have protocols for increased hygiene, sanitization, health and safety, and then isolation of ill employees. So I also think it's important to note that, while the salmon season is about to kick off, we've been processing fish in Alaska since January, mostly in Kodiak and Agutan, and then also in our lower 48 value-added plant. So this has really been, that experience has provided us with an opportunity to work through a lot of logistics and problems that might come up. So we feel like we're well prepared, but certainly taking this very seriously. And then just a couple other updates. I think as everybody knows, really at this point, the state released the Health Mandate 17 earlier this month, which provides guidance for independent catcher vessels, and we've been very supportive of that mandate. I think it provides a lot of clarity and uniformity for a pretty diverse fleet. And then we've provided quite a bit of outreach to our fleet just in terms of what's required of the mandate, things to think about or purchase before heading out for salmon season. And then we've taken a lot of steps to figure out how we can help make sure that the fleet meets those requirements. And then we have, I've communicated this with you, Mayor Copeland, but we've been advocating at the state level for additional in-region infrastructure, assessment of medical support capacity, prioritization of test kits, and funding for monitoring and compliance tools. So it seems like, based on the regional call this week that representatives from the state were on, that the state's been really proactive in this regard recently, and so really appreciate the work from DHHS and Unified Command. So that's all I have. I'm going to turn it over to Rick for some updates on staffing and operations. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Mayor Clay Copeland. Like Shannon said, nurse practitioner, she is going to be in on the 11th of this month. The clinic just got finished up. It's going to have 6 quarantine rooms, plus an office and an exam room and a waiting room. Right now, we have 40 people in quarantine in Anchorage. They're due to be finished up on the 18th. Like Shannon said, they will be tested prior to the ending of the quarantine, and from there, we're going to be on secured buses going to the airport. They will go to the private side on chartered planes that are all cleaned and ready to go, and then sent to Cordova, where they'll not go through the airport, but go around at the private gate. The next group we have will be coming in on June 2nd with approximately 36 people. Then on June 5th, we have another group coming in, about 80, and you'll have more people coming in the next 2 weeks after that. Those are still working on those issues. We have just got our fencing in from Anchorage or getting offloaded on the barge, so be able to completely close off the south plant. And then on the north plant, with the city's approval to close off Jimport Avenue, we'll be running across from our bunkhouse to our warehouse, and then between our warehouse and the Quonset hut between Ocean Beauty, and then kind of across the street, corner of LFS and the warehouse. And we'll have security there, making sure that all residents of both the north and south stay on the property, except for a few runners. And then anybody that needs to go in between the north and the south work will be transported by vans and buses. So, and now we're just getting really excited to start to see the first salmon of the summer or the spring here next week on the 14th.
Well, that's great, Rick. Really appreciate all the work that Trident Seafoods has been doing for weeks, really, and again, your transparency and openness and sharing your early plans, encouraging us to share them with the whole community, welcoming feedback and input to identify areas where those might be strengthened or where there are elements that might not be as essential, and have just really appreciated the partnership we've had with Trident Seafoods, and easily one of the most challenging preparations for a salmon season. But as you mentioned, it's almost upon us. So how do you feel like the season is shaping up?
Well, I think there's definitely going to be some challenges with the season, early season with the Copper River, with most of the restaurants closed down. But people are excited. Weather's great in Seattle right now. It's about 80 degrees. And so I think people are ready to go to their Costco's and their QFCs and the fish markets, which are open, and get some of this fish. So Alaska Airlines is doing their first fish again this year. We're going to be donating the first king and then some sockeye, and one of the local chefs is going to take that fish and cook it up on Friday night for first responder dinners up in, I'm not sure, but I think it's the Swedish Ballard Hospital. So we're pretty excited about that partnership. That's also with Ocean Beauty and Copper River Seafoods.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was talking to one of our local doctors, and he's eating salmon every day. He says the amino acids, the salmon is really one of the healthy nutritional foods that a lot of nutritionists are recommending people take during the virus to help your own immune system. So that sounds like a lot of fun, and it's great to be thinking of our first responders at this time. And I know you have, as you've put your plans together, and really appreciate the medical resources you're bringing to the community this year as well to get those early detections that not only help with the spread, but really assist the medical team in treating people before the symptoms can overwhelm some of our resources for your workers and Fleet's health and also for the community. So thanks again. Just really appreciate you being on this, helping to update the community on some of the great plans we have in place, and looking forward to a great first week. Any final comments?
Just thank you to the city and everybody that's been working so hard to have great plans in place to make sure that we can have a successful season and keep everybody in Cordova and our employees and our fishermen safe and healthy.
Okay, well, thank you much. And
thanks for having us on, Clay.
You betcha. Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, that again was the information that came out Friday, the 4 p.m. briefing. If you want to take a look at that, incidentally, well, of course, it'll be archived in this show, but it's also on the city's YouTube channel and our YouTube channel. Some things that stood out, and something we've been talking about a lot here at the stations this weekend. You heard the mayor mention that Cordova's businesses classified officially as non-essential. Doesn't mean they aren't, essential or important, but it has to do with his state classification, the sort of life and limb businesses versus things the state perceives that, are more optional. But at any rate, the businesses that began opening Friday in Cordova are operating under a different set of rules than most of the rest of the state. It was kind of unfortunate in a way that Cordova's non-essential businesses started to open at the same time that the state was advancing to a new phase. Because if you were watching not national, but statewide news or looking at statewide newspapers like ADN or whatever, you were seeing different information about constraints on non-essential businesses than what applies to the ones in Cordova. So we just want to reiterate again that Cordova's non-essential businesses are opening under Phase 1 protocols. And those protocols are a little more difficult to find now that the state has updated all of its content to Phase 2. We captured the Phase 1 documents before they went off the state site and put them in a packet with the latest Cordova emergency order. And as we've been telling you, you can download that from our website, cordovaradio.com, and you'll see how all of this stuff applies to Cordova in context. Whereas if you were to go to the state site right now, say you were a restaurant owner and wanted to review what's allowed and what's not, if you went to the state site and looked at the attachment for restaurants, you'd be seeing the Phase 2 documents, which it says right up at the top of those documents. If you look, it talks about what phase the documents represent. And Phase 2 doesn't apply to Cordova. The local experts and the city council agreed that Cordova should stay in Phase 1 until further notice. So you'll want to, again, customers and business owners. This applies to the customers just as much in terms of setting your expectations as a customer for what is going to happen when you go to do business. And I'm pretty sure that the city's website updated its links. We once I discovered there was a discrepancy, I called, and the people running the city website, I'm pretty sure were able to update their links. So if you go to our site or the city site, it should point you to the right place. But if you go to the state site with regard to non-essential businesses, Mandate 16, if you go to the state site and click any of the attachments, A through K or whatever they are now, the ones for the different types of businesses, the state site is showing newer versions of what's allowed than what's allowed in Cordova. So again, it's this Phase 1 versus Phase 2. Cordova is in Phase 1, and that's where we're going to stay according to the according to the IMT and according to the city council until the local experts determine that it's time to move on. It's also a good time to remind everyone in business, essential business, non-essential business, doesn't matter. We're all supposed to have a mutual aid agreement on file with the city. It's a document that you can get from the city's website. Most of us have probably filled them out, but there may be some businesses who are just beginning to reopen or beginning to think about it, the ones that had been shut down before that are now allowed to begin opening again. Which again, the scope of businesses that are allowed to open in Cordova is different from the rest of the state. That's another key thing. For example, if you were watching KTUU or reading ADN, you would see information that bars and bowling alleys and bingo halls and some of these entertainment venue type businesses are allowed to open at 25% capacity. That doesn't apply here. So if anybody had a bowling alley in Cordova and heard through state media, they can start opening again. There again, that's why it's important to understand the difference between where Cordova is and where the state is. And the city website and the documents on our website will help keep that clear. But the mutual aid agreements, again, they're real easy to fill out. And what you're basically doing is you're promising to the city that you know what's expected with regard to social distancing and the various important slowing of the spread rules. And just signing your name to that. And once the city, has your promise on file, as City Manager Howarth put it last week, once you make that promise, then all is good between a business and the city. Remember, too, something that's different between Cordova's rules and the state rules. The state has opened up larger gatherings of people to no more than 50. As you heard Mayor Copeland mention, Cordova is still at no more than 20. So keep that in mind as well. And as you probably heard the Trident representatives say, and as we've mentioned a number of times, if you're interested in seeing Trident's mitigation plan, that has been posted, even though they're a private company, obviously, they have shared their plan on the city website, and it's been up there for quite some time, actually. I'll tell you from my own perspective, and this is not meant to influence anybody else as far as how good or not good you feel the plan is. I mean, I was very much wondering how on earth the processors are going to have any ability to control for this kind of thing. And, after reading Trident's plan, I was kind of like, wow, okay. This is basically putting everybody in a bubble and transporting them in that bubble until they get to the plant, and then keeping a bubble around the plant between using private aircraft, private transportation between the airport and the plant, and then once everybody's on campus, they stay on campus and getting their own medical personnel and their testing regimes, and then that 14 days of quarantine in Anchorage before they're even allowed to come here. Very interesting stuff. And if you want to read it and learn more, for example, about how they're going to interact with their fishermen and how the tenders are going to work and how delivery will be taken or things will be delivered to boats, off boats, all of it, it's an interesting read if you haven't seen it yet, and you can find a link to it still, according to the Trident folks. The link should still be there at the cityofcordova.net COVID site. And the direct link to that COVID site is covid19.cityofcordova.net. And I haven't done any sort of, I haven't sought multiple attestation on this, but it is interesting that we have one of our local doctors emphatically recommending the consumption of wild salmon because of something that he knows with regard to how it beefs up your immune system. And I don't know if that has to do with strengthening cells or what's involved. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to research it. So, I mean, it's anecdotal information, but when it's anecdotal information from a doctor, that makes it a little more interesting. So salmon could be very valuable for our defense and could also be valuable for places that it gets sent, whether that's, the restaurant quality fillets, and obviously demand for those is probably going to be weird this year. But at the same time, there seem to be a number of reports out there. I can't remember if it was UFA or maybe the Saving Seafood folks or something that, talking about how, particularly with the meat shortages, some of the other meat shortages in beef and so forth, that being able to get salmon out there is into the food chain or food supply is going to be important. Might be more canning than more value-adding product, but it does definitely sound like there's a need for it. So I think we'll call it good there. And again, always appreciate you tuning in to the Town Meeting Talk Show, brought to you by Cordova Wireless Communications here on KLAM. We do the show on demand when there's enough information, during the pandemic. When we compile enough to warrant taking some time to visit, then we do that. But as always, are happy to do a show anytime somebody thinks there ought to be one. I want to call your attention again to the show that we did on Friday, which is on the YouTube channel, which focuses again on this Phase 1 versus Phase 2 reopening of the non-essential businesses and why it's important to know the difference. And the bulk of that show, about 40 minutes or so, was us talking with Kathy Renfelt of the Cordova Chamber of Commerce. And I was very happily stunned to see how much the Chamber has in the way of assets for helping businesses through this. Right down to creative advice for that business owner that may be out there thinking, this pandemic has destroyed my opportunity to do business. I'm not going to be able to function in this new environment. And what Kathy was basically saying to that is, no, don't think that way. We'll help you come up with creative ideas to modify your business model so you can continue to be in business and hopefully be successful at it. But don't give up until you've talked to our local Chamber of Commerce. And that's counseling, by the way, that they're extending not just to members. I mean, it should be recognized that the Chamber's ability to offer that counseling to everybody is made possible by the members. And Kathy was very clear to show great appreciation to the people who are members of the Chamber of Commerce. We have been forever, pretty much. So a big thanks to those members. And but recognize that you don't have to be a member to ask a question of the Chamber or to go to their website and look at what they have available. And there's a ton of stuff available on the site, but if it's just hard to navigate, you can call them and ask them. But if you'd like to hear that show, like I said, it's a good one. And you can hear it by going to youtube.com/Cordova TV. Look for the town meeting program. That's one of the ones with all red letters on the logo. The town meeting program for the 8th, May 8th. That whole conversation is archived there. It's in its entirety. So thanks again for listening. Thanks again to Cordova Wireless Communications. There's an awful lot that we would not be able to do without the support of Cordova Wireless and CTC, too. The both of them are great sponsors of local radio. We hope you enjoy moving through the week. We'll continue to keep you informed as best we can with the facts and the accurate stuff. And we'll, of course, make up any programming scheduled for the 10 a.m. hour that got delayed by us doing the show here. A reminder, daily briefings coming up at 1, 5, and 8 p.m. We'll get the latest a little later in the day on what the city's got for us as we move into the new week. And I'll say again, it's been a pleasure doing our best to serve you here, and we wish you all the best for this Monday.